It's not a question of good or bad. It's just if you have those aspects, that's normal for you. The challenge from the chart is to live up to the planet and the sign and make it better. Planet and the house make it better. The aspects just to alert you to the fact this is going to take a bit more effort than someone. Some people take more effort than others. But there's someone who's making the effort, someone who doesn't have the effort, looks like they're lazy or sloppy. They're not going to be as together. So it's not a disadvantage to have the squares. It's a specific type of vulnerability, but then there's a specific gifts. But interpreting a chart, you don't have to impose the retrogrades on the natal chart. Some people argue with me tremendously. It's enough to just work with the planet in the sign. We'll see the progressions and how they evolve and their effects as we get into progressions. So with transits, we understand Mars and out. We watch Mars and the planets out, the transits going around. We see that very clearly. We've watched them too. We've watched how it happened in their life. And wow, we didn't work with Mercury, Venus, or the Moon very much because they were such fast cycles. So what we see in transits with Mars and out, when we get to progressions, it's the Moon, Mercury, and Venus, and the inner and the Sun that really hugely have a powerful influence. So we really learn about those, our values and our intelligence and our intellect, how it develops from the progressions. Okay, how are we doing for time? Okay, we're about there. What's next? Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about heliocentric astrology. So this is heliocentric astrology is sun-centered. You take the chart, you put all the planets around the sun. We're looking from the Earth, and we have our houses, we have the moon. When you want to interpret, it's like kind of like a spiritual level or a higher level or more soulful or heartful level. You're looking from your sun, but you're not there's no houses in this heliocentric system. There's no house concerns about money, relationships, sex. Those are not heliocentric concerns. They fall away. You don't talk about it like that. You talk about the planet and the signs and the attitudes. And there's no moon, so you don't use any memories, nothing from the past. You're talking about now, how these energies work, and you can see. So the heliocentric astrology has this inner planets are always direct. They're going around. It's great for watching historical cycles or phases because you can see times going on. But on a personal level, your Mercury and Venus can be in very different signs. Then they're one way in the worldly way, they're another way when it comes to your spiritual studying or thinking or inner thinking or inner evaluating. So there's an article about it. I'm sure you'll have it in material. I'm not going to go over this whole article. I want to get to the drawings of orbital influences. Sort of the textures of life. So we measure things in a chart around a circle. But planets and mathematics measures timing and music. They measure everything in circles and perfect intervals, quarters, half, thirds. They measure everything in perfect divisions. But in life, nothing is a perfect circle. Everything's an ellipse. It's a distorted circle. So if you're a mathematician or you're believing everything is perfect circles and that's divine, that's the divine order, then life is really corrupt because it warps all these perfect circles into ellipses and it must be evil. But really, life is textured. Nothing's a perfect circle. It's always a little bit off in one way or the other. So when you're looking from the sun, all the planets have a phase in there. They have their orbit, which is an ellipse, and one part is closer to the sun, and one part is furthest away from the sun. So when you take an ellipse, there's really two centers to an ellipse. One where the sun would be, and then where how far off center the other center would be, would make an ellipse instead of the circle. So we use the chart as a circle. And we're watching planets go around as a circle, but as we do that, the planet will move slower when it's further away from the sun, and faster when it's closer to the sun. So on the heliocentric charts, I put a bump in the orbit when it's going to be the furthest away. This point out, when it points in, that's when it's closest. The perihelion is when it's closest to the sun, and you're born with the sun. The planet may be anywhere along here, but when these are the two extremes and the halfway points. So these are 4 heliocentric factors, and you can see the different speeds of planets as you're going along that. We're jumping fast in. We talked about heliocentric charts already when we talked about the chart forms for the 21st century. We touched on this a little bit. This is just a little bit more of the technical information to think about it. I don't use it all the time, but it's there, and it's something that you might not do for everyone else, but you want to see for yourself. It does represent this higher frequency. The sun is always in the opposite sign from the Earth, the opposite degree of the opposite sign. So if I'm a Libra, the sun's in Libra, in Aries. And the Earth will be, the sun is in Libra in the chart. The Earth will be in Aries from the heliocentric chart. So the Earth is in the opposite side. So the Earth becomes in the heliocentric chart your sense of separation, your ego, I'm different from everything else, your physical separation from everybody. And the sun is your oneness of everything. So from the ego to the soul, from the ego to the heart to the soul, this is part of this transition. And we have our Earth going around, the other planets are all going up and down in different ways, and there's nodes, all the different nodes. We've been watching the nodes to the moon to watch the eclipses, but each planet has nodes to each other planet. There's hundreds of nodes in the solar system. And there's one from each planet, there's 9 for each to the Earth's orbit. So you have the point in the orbit where it's hitting the north node, it's going north, then it's the south node, and you have the maximum north and maximum south points. So you have 4 points in the nodal cycle, which is different than the closeness and the farthest cycle. There's 2 depths of levels of interpretation here. So this puts 2 planet orbs. So like you can see, it's measuring, like the inside one is moving here, and it's at the north node. It's going north with this middle circle, and the south node is what's coming south of it. And the second one is, it's going north and south. You can see where these aspects run into each other. Simpler way of seeing it. Again, just try. These were just hand-drawn drawings. Seems like it was another century. It's another time. We're in a different world today. But this still goes. So here you see this, the white part of the inner orbit is above, the dark part is below. But the circular orbit going around the north node, this arrow here, is when this outer planet is moving north of the other plane. There's the maximum point north. It comes to south. The south node is going below the other orbital plane and coming down. So this is the 4 points marked by the nodes. So when a planet is at the nodes, it's not an eclipse, it's just at a maximum point of influence to the Earth. But if the Earth were there at that point, it would probably mean the Earth's there and the sun would be there and there'd be alignment and there would be an eclipse, and it would look like things are being affected by the shadow of the sun. This whole process of this class is to just stretch the texture of not thinking just degrees. Well, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on here. The degrees started, you're seeing it, but then it's one thing to see a picture of someone. It's another to see someone across the street. It's another thing when they walk right up to you and they give you a hug and you're having to relate to them or live with them in the same house. There's a whole bunch of other considerations that come in. So when you're changing the zodiac to the other, this would be how it works. The sun on the left, the circle for the sun, there's the zodiac, the sun's there, and the Earth's going around it. But the one on the left would be the Earth is in the center, and the sun's going through the signs of the zodiac. These are the old symbols that I used to use, so bear with me there. I'm not going to get into it now, but you can see the two. This should be redone, but anyways, the sun takes the opposite degree, and from the Earth we have all the planets being around. So when we're looking from the Earth, Mercury is always, if this is 0 degrees Aries where the sun is, Mercury will be in Aries or Pisces. Mercury will be in Aries or Pisces. And but when you're looking from the heliocentric chart, Mercury could be almost anywhere around the circle at the same time. Like it's different. So you have 2 layers of how your mind works. One when you're thinking worldly, and one when you're trying to get connected to your heart. Okay, so this were positions that were put for the heliocentric factors. This was a long time ago, so now the inclination factors are known. These things for Mercury are known, but there's the distance factors closest or furthest to the sun. The nodal factors on the same plane or not at the orbital planes, and the zodiac and the seasonal factors. Each planet has its own seasons, the light or darkness based on how it's the axis it's in and how it's facing the sun, and it brings in the seasons. So there's the seasons of each planet in its own orbit. Well, that's seasons of each planet in its orbit is each planet has its own zodiac. So if you had to do a planet for Mars, a chart for someone on Mars or a spaceship on Mars, you would have a different chart. You'd have to use the Martian zodiac, and then Earth would be in a position inside of that Martian zodiac. Lots of different concepts here, but each planet, like we interpret Uranus in Gemini, or Uranus right now it's in Aries. We have Uranus in a certain sign, and we look at it in the sign terms of our Earth, but we're not looking at Uranus in its own season, its own energy. There's another frequency, another meaning that's going into that same position of Uranus, different energy it's generating. So another thing, we're on Earth, that's our physical body. We're here, our ego, our being, the sun is our ego. The Mercury and the Venus are two inner planets that represent our mind, and our Venus are inner faculties. And the Mars, Jupiter, Saturn are energies we put out, how we understand our use of energies and the limits to what we can do. And then the extremes we take things to are shown by Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And the disruptions that come from that. But if you're on Mars, Earth becomes an inner planet. There's three inner factors. So there would be, for someone that's a Martian, if you had a human that was conceived and was born on Mars, they would not be an Earthan. They would not be a Terran. They wouldn't have the same. They would have three inner faculties, not two. Can this be possible? Is this so? Well, nobody's out there yet. But there would be the third inner planet, and there would be another inner quality. So there would be the mind, the emotions, and something else that would be an interior focus, an internal focus for someone living on Mars. And Jupiter would be the first outer planet. Then so it's like there'd be less room to move around. With less planets outside, more struggles within. Heliocentric is really fascinating, but it's not something that you work with a consultation. You're starting with the natal chart, but there's many places to jump to expand and look at things right up to the shores of the temple of God, right up to silence, where many frequencies we live on. So these were just the different factors. I'm not going to stay on all of them. These were done for the epoch of 1950, so probably they need to be. They would be different now. These cycles all move. These positions all move. So, okay, I come along when you're trying to interpret the geocentric, the heliocentric. Are we doing for time? Okay, good.